In a wood-paneled living room in Schaumburg, Illinois, in 1983, a family of 4 sat around a Zenith on a Friday night. The show cut to commercial. A man in a convertible spoke into a plastic tube, and his voice came through the car radio. That product sold over 1 million units. It is number 25 on this list. Number 11 featured a dog that was secretly female. Number 7 turned a retired manicurist into a national celebrity. The 1980s produced commercials that had no business working. They ignored logic, abandoned taste, and burned themselves into the memory of an entire generation. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 funny commercials from the 1980s that made no sense. Number 25, MR Microphone. Ronco released this in 1981 for $17.88. It was a cheap wireless transmitter that broadcast your voice to the nearest FM radio within about 50 feet. The commercial showed a man cruising in a convertible, using it to holler at a woman walking down the street. The tagline was, "Hey, good looking, we will be back to pick you up later." The entire premise of the ad was that a plastic microphone could help a stranger harass women from a moving vehicle. It sold over 1 million units in its first year. Children used it to annoy their siblings. Teenagers used it to hijack their parents' kitchen radios during dinner. Dads tried it in the garage and accidentally broadcast over the neighbor's boombox. The signal bled into any FM receiver within range, which meant your voice could end up on a stranger's car stereo without warning. And nobody at Ronco ever stopped to ask whether the commercial was a good idea. It was not, but it was impossible to forget. Number 24, Shake and Bake. The commercial ran through most of the 1980s and into the 1990s. A mother-coated chicken in a bag of seasoned breadcrumbs. Then a small child, barely tall enough to see over the counter, looked straight into the camera and declared, "And I helped." That was it. The child shook a bag. The mother did all the actual cooking. The child contributed approximately 3 seconds of wrist movement and received full credit on national television. But the line became one of the most repeated catchphrases of the decade. Offices across America adopted it. Someone would finish a massive project, and a coworker who had done almost nothing would grin and say, "And I helped." Schools heard it. Little League dugouts heard it. Thanksgiving kitchens heard it from every child who carried a single plate to the table. Kraft sold millions of boxes on the strength of a 4-year-old taking credit for shaking a paper bag. The product was fine, the commercial was brilliant, and the phrase outlived the product's peak by at least 20 years. Number 23, Kool-Aid Man. A group of children played outside on a hot summer day. They got thirsty. Somebody shouted, "Hey, Kool-Aid!" Then a 6-foot-tall anthropomorphic glass pitcher filled with red liquid smashed through a brick wall. He looked at the terrified children and bellowed, "Oh yeah!" The property damage alone should have ended the campaign in 1975. Instead, it ran for over 2 decades. The premise never changed. Children expressed thirst. A giant pitcher destroyed a load-bearing wall. Everyone drank sugar water and smiled. No parent in the commercial ever questioned why a sentient beverage was demolishing their home. No contractor ever showed up with an estimate. No insurance adjuster appeared with a clipboard. The Kool-Aid Man just crashed through walls like a wrecking ball in a pair of shoes, and everybody acted like that was normal. By the 1980s, the character had his own video game, his own comic books, and a level of brand recognition that rivaled Mickey Mouse. A pitcher of juice had become an American icon through sheer structural violence. Your living room wall was never safe. Number 22, Chia Pet, Chia. That jingle started airing in 1982, and it never stopped. The product was a hollow terracotta figurine shaped like a ram, a puppy, or eventually a human head. You spread chia seeds on it, watered it, and watched a thin layer of sprouts grow over the surface like green fur. It did nothing else. It served no function. It could not be eaten, worn, or used as a tool. It was a clay animal that grew a small amount of plant hair, and yet Joseph Pedot sold millions of them by running the same commercial every holiday season for nearly 40 years. The ad showed the before and after in fast motion, which made the sprouts look almost magical. In reality, the process took about 2 weeks, and the results looked like a forgotten science project from a third-grade classroom. Half the Chia Pets sold in America were gag gifts. The other half were impulse purchases made at 2 in the morning by people who could not explain their decision the next day. The jingle did all the selling, 3 syllables repeated until they lodged in your brain like a splinter. You did not want a Chia Pet. You just could not stop hearing the song. Number 21st, Teddy Ruxpin. In 1985, a toy company called Worlds of Wonder released a stuffed bear that moved its mouth and eyes while playing cassette tapes from a deck hidden in its back. The commercial showed a child sitting alone with the bear, listening to a story while the bear appeared to talk directly to them. It was supposed to be heartwarming. For many children, it was deeply unsettling. The mechanical jaw movements were just slow enough to fall into that strange territory where something looks almost alive, but not quite right. The eyes blinked on a timer that had nothing to do with the words being spoken. At $69.99, Teddy Ruxpin was one of the most expensive toys of the decade. Parents stood in line for hours during Christmas of 1985. Some paid double on the secondary market. The bear sold over 5 million units before the company went bankrupt in 1987. Within 6 months of purchase, half of those bears sat in closets with dead batteries, their mouths frozen mid-sentence in the dark. Children who put the wrong cassette in discovered that Teddy Ruxpin would move his mouth to any audio, including heavy metal albums. That was not in the commercial. Number 20, the clapper. Clap on, clap off. The clapper. Joseph Enterprises introduced this in 1984 as a sound-activated electrical switch. Clap twice and your lamp turned on. Clap twice again and it turned off. The commercial showed elderly people reclining in bed, clapping their lights off with a satisfied smile. Simple, elegant, revolutionary. In practice, the clapper responded to almost any sharp noise. A dog barking turned your lights on at 3 in the morning. A sneeze turned them off during dinner. The television itself could trigger it during a laugh track, which meant your living room lamp flickered through every episode of Cheers like a strobe light. Loud arguments reportedly caused the lamps to flicker like a haunted house. Thunderstorms turned entire rooms into accidental light shows. Over 7 million units sold by the end of the decade, despite the fact that the product worked correctly only about half the time. The jingle became so embedded in American culture that people still sing it today, decades after most clappers ended up in junk drawers next to dead batteries and rubber bands. Number 19, My Buddy and Kid Sister. In 1985, Hasbro released My Buddy, a soft doll marketed specifically to boys. The commercial featured a jingle so catchy it bordered on psychological warfare. My buddy, wherever I go, he goes. A boy dragged the doll to the park, to bed, to the dinner table. The song played on a loop in the heads of every parent who had seen the ad more than twice. Then Hasbro released Kid Sister for girls with an equally relentless jingle. My Kid Sister and Me. The commercials ran constantly during Saturday morning cartoons and during after-school programming. But the real legacy was darker than Hasbro intended. Director Tom Holland has said that the My Buddy doll was one of the inspirations for Chucky in the 1988 film Child's Play. The resemblance was unmistakable. Same red hair, same overalls, same dead-eyed stare. A generation of children who had slept next to My Buddy suddenly could not look at the doll without imagining it reaching for a kitchen knife. Yard sales across America featured the doll by 1989. Nobody wanted it anymore. Hasbro never publicly acknowledged the connection. Number 18. Mr. T cereal. In 1984, Quaker Oats put Mr. T's face on a box of cereal shaped like the letter T. The commercial showed Mr. T in full gold chains and a mohawk, glaring at children and growling, "I pity the fool who does not eat my cereal." The cereal was mostly corn, oats, and a considerable amount of sugar. It tasted like sweetened cardboard pressed into a letter shape. None of that mattered. Mr. T was the biggest action star on Saturday morning television thanks to the A-Team and Rocky III. Children begged their parents for the cereal, not because it was good, but because the box had a man on it who could bend steel and had feelings about breakfast. The ads aired during Saturday morning cartoon blocks, targeting children under 9 years old. Stickers came inside the box. Kids collected them like currency on the playground. Quaker discontinued it by 1986. The cereal lasted 2 years. The catchphrase lasted a generation. Somewhere in America, a sealed box of Mr. T cereal from 1984 sits on a collector's shelf, worth more than the car Mr. T drove in the commercial. Number 17. The Noid. In 1986, Domino's Pizza introduced a claymation villain called the Noid. He was a small red creature in a bunny suit with buck teeth, whose only purpose in life was to ruin your pizza delivery. He smashed boxes, he froze pies, he did everything in his power to prevent a warm pizza from reaching your door. The commercials told viewers to avoid the Noid. The character was designed by Will Vinton, the same animator behind the California Raisins. The Noid looked like a gremlin had raided a Halloween costume shop. The campaign was enormously successful and ran for nearly a decade. Domino's even built an entire video game around the character. Children who had never ordered a pizza in their lives knew who the Noid was. Then, in January of 1989, a man named Kenneth Lamar Noid walked into a Domino's in Chamblee, Georgia, with a revolver. He believed the campaign telling people to avoid the Noid was a personal attack against him. He held 2 employees hostage for over 5 hours. The standoff ended without fatalities, but Domino's quietly retired the mascot soon after. A cartoon pizza villain had collided with real-world tragedy in the strangest way the advertising industry had ever seen. Number 16. Ginsu Knives. But wait, there is more. That phrase entered the American vocabulary in 1978, and by the early 1980s, every late-night viewer in the country could recite the Ginsu knife commercial from memory. The ad showed the knife slicing through a tin can, then a tomato, then a shoe, then a frozen block of something unidentifiable. The name sounded Japanese, but the knives were made in Fremont, Ohio. 2 marketers, Ed Valenti and Barry Becker, invented the name because they thought it sounded exotic. The original campaign sold over 3 million knife sets at $9.95 each. The brilliance was not in the knife itself, which was a perfectly ordinary stamped steel blade. The brilliance was in the format. Each demonstration topped the last. Each offer included more free items. The viewer could not turn away because the next claim was always more absurd than the one before it. Number 15. Wendy's Where's the Beef? On January 10, 1984, an 81-year-old retired manicurist from Chicago named Clara Peller looked at an oversized hamburger bun with a tiny patty inside and barked 3 words that changed advertising forever. Where's the beef? The commercial was directed by Joe Settlemeyer and written by Cliff Freeman at the agency Dancer Fitzgerald Sample. The concept was straightforward. 3 elderly women stood at a fictional competitor's counter and received a massive fluffy bun with a patty the size of a silver dollar hidden inside. 2 of the women marveled at the big bun. Clara did not. Clara was supposed to say, "Where's all the beef?" but emphysema made the longer line difficult. The shortened version was better. It was meaner. It was funnier. And it hit like a hammer on a hollow drum. Wendy's sales jumped 31% that year. The phrase crossed into presidential politics when Walter Mondale used it against Gary Hart during the 1984 Democratic primaries to suggest that Hart's policies were all style and no substance. It appeared in newspaper headlines. Late-night hosts repeated it. T-shirts, bumper stickers, frisbees, and a board game followed within months. Clara Peller stood 4 feet 10 inches tall, was hard of hearing, and had lungs that barely worked. She earned $317.40 for her first day of filming. Within months, she was earning tens of thousands from sequels and product tie-ins. She appeared on talk shows. She walked red carpets. Then Wendy's fired her in 1985 after she appeared in a Prego pasta sauce commercial saying she had found it. The company felt betrayed. Clara had found the beef somewhere else. She passed away in 1987, 1 week after her 85th birthday. A woman who could barely breathe had become the most quoted person in America. She stood at a fast food counter and yelled at a bun with genuine outrage, and an entire country yelled along with her. The beef was never the point. The fury was. Number 14. California Raisins. In 1986, the California Raisin Advisory Board was desperate. Raisin sales were falling year after year. Nobody under the age of 60 wanted to eat dried grapes. So an advertising agency hired Will Vinton Studios to create 4 claymation raisins wearing sunglasses and performing "I Heard It Through the Grapevine" by Marvin Gaye. The raisins had no legs, no arms to speak of, and barely any facial features. They were wrinkled, they were brown. They shuffled across the screen like elderly Motown performers who had been left in the sun too long. They had absolutely no business being cool. And yet they became one of the biggest merchandising phenomena of the decade. Lunchboxes, plush toys, a primetime television special, and a video game followed. Raisin sales jumped 20% after the first commercial aired. Grocery stores could not keep them in stock. 4 dried fruits with sunglasses and a Motown soundtrack had done what decades of traditional advertising could not. They made raisins desirable to children who would not willingly eat a vegetable. The campaign proved that if you give anything enough rhythm and a good pair of shades, America will buy it. In 1987, Bud Light introduced a bull terrier named Spuds MacKenzie, the original party animal. The dog wore Hawaiian shirts, played drums, surfed, lounged by pools, and was always surrounded by a group of women called the Spudettes. The commercials debuted during Super Bowl 21 and ran for 2 years. Bud Light sales rose 20% between 1987 and 1988. Spuds appeared on T-shirts, posters, and inflatable pool toys in fraternity houses across the country. There was one problem the advertising team hoped nobody would notice. Spuds MacKenzie was female. Her real name was Honeytree Evil Eye, Evie for short. The entire campaign was built on a male party animal character played by a dog wearing sunglasses. Watchdog groups eventually accused Anheuser-Busch of marketing alcohol to children through a cartoon-like animal mascot. Number 12. Bartles and Jaymes. In 1985, E&J Gala Winery launched a wine cooler brand with a pair of fictional spokesmen, Frank Bartles and Ed Jaymes. 2 older men sat on a porch in rocking chairs. Frank did all the talking in a flat, folksy monotone about their new business venture. Ed never said a word. He just sat there looking mildly confused. Every commercial ended the same way. "Thank you for your support." The men were actors hired by ad legend Hal Riney. The product was made by one of the largest wine companies in the world. But the ads worked because they felt handmade. Like 2 retirees had stumbled into the beverage industry by accident and were slightly amazed that anyone was buying their product. By 1988, Bartles and Jaymes appeared in a Super Bowl commercial and were as recognizable as any celebrity spokesman in America. The whole thing was a corporate illusion, dressed up as a front porch conversation between two men who looked like they should be selling bait. And the audience loved every second of it because the act was so committed that doubting it felt rude. On January 22, 1984, during Super Bowl XVIII, Apple aired a 60-second commercial directed by Ridley Scott. Scott had just finished Blade Runner, and he knew how to make dystopia look beautiful. Rows of bald, gray-skinned drones marched through a tunnel, while a giant screen broadcast propaganda from a Big Brother figure. A woman in red shorts and a white tank top sprinted through the crowd carrying a sledgehammer. She hurled it at the screen, and it exploded in a burst of white light. A voice announced that Apple Computer was introducing Macintosh, and that 1984 would not be like the novel 1984. The ad cost roughly $900,000 to produce and another $500,000 to air during the game. It ran once and was never officially broadcast again in the United States. 200 extras shaved their heads for $125 a day to play the drones. Apple's own board of directors reportedly hated the commercial before it aired. They tried to sell back the airtime. The commercial sold almost nothing in the traditional sense. It showed no product, demonstrated no features, and never mentioned a price or a specification. It was a short film about totalitarianism that happened to mention a computer in the final seconds. And it is still considered the greatest television commercial ever made. Number 10. Ernest P. Worrell. In 1980, a Nashville advertising agency called Carden and Cherry needed to promote a failing amusement park near Bowling Green, Kentucky. Actor Jim Varney put on a denim vest and a baseball cap and created Ernest P. Worrell, a rubber-faced, hyperactive neighbor who appeared at the window of an unseen, apparently unwilling man named Vern. Hey, Vern. That was the opening of every commercial. Ernest talked at Vern about whatever product he was selling that week. Dairy Queen, Coca-Cola, Toyota dealerships, local furniture stores in cities most Americans had never heard of. Vern never spoke. Vern never appeared on screen. The audience only knew Vern wanted Ernest to leave. The character appeared in hundreds of regional commercials throughout the 1980s before jumping to national ads and eventually a series of feature films. Varney won a Daytime Emmy for a children's show built around the character. He could contort his face into expressions that defied human muscle structure. His delivery was so fast and so physical that watching a 30-second Ernest commercial felt like watching a man try to escape his own skeleton. The character made no sense as a spokesman for anything. That was exactly why he worked. In 1986, Coca-Cola hired Max Headroom to sell new Coke. Max Headroom was a character played by actor Matt Frewer, wearing heavy prosthetic makeup and a fiberglass suit designed to look like a computer-generated television personality. He stuttered, he glitched, and he delivered catchphrases in a jerky synthetic voice, all while telling viewers to catch. The problem was that New Coke was already one of the biggest product failures in corporate history. Consumers hated the new formula. Protests erupted. People hoarded cases of the original. And Coca-Cola's response was to have a fictional computer character with a stutter tell people the product was amazing. The ads were visually ahead of their time. Max Headroom looked like nothing else on television. But the marriage of a failed product and a digital spokesman who could not finish a sentence without buffering became a perfect symbol of corporate confusion. Coca-Cola brought back the original formula within months. Max Headroom moved on to other endorsements and his own television show. The whole campaign played like a glitch in the advertising matrix that nobody could reboot. Number 7. Maxell Blown Away Guy. The ad first appeared as a 2-page magazine spread in Rolling Stone in 1980 and moved to television in 1981. A man sat in a Le Corbusier leather chair in front of a pair of enormous speakers. The music hit. His hair blew straight back. His tie flew sideways. The lamp behind him tilted at a 45-degree angle. The martini glass on the side table trembled. Everything in the room appeared to be pushed backward by the sheer force of sound. The message was simple. Maxell cassette tapes delivered audio so powerful it could physically move a human being in a chair. The model was reportedly a makeup artist named Jack Colello, who had previously worked with David Bowie. Photographer Steve Steigman shot the original print version. The television ad played Wagner's Ride of the Valkyrie over the visuals. It became one of the most imitated images of the decade. College students taped it to dorm room walls from coast to coast. Musicians referenced it in album art. The entire concept was physically impossible. Sound waves from consumer speakers could not move a person or their furniture, but the image was so striking and so perfectly composed that nobody cared about the physics. The feeling was true even if the science was not. Number 6. Energizer Bunny. In late 1988, Energizer ran a commercial that started as a direct parody of Duracell's drumming bunny ads. The ad opened with what looked like a typical battery commercial, a pink toy bunny banging a drum. Then the Energizer Bunny marched in from the side, still going. The joke was that Energizer batteries outlasted the competition. The bunny kept going, and going, and going. The phrase became one of the most durable advertising slogans of the century, which was fitting for a commercial about durability. The original bunny was a remote-controlled prop built by All Effects, a special effects company in Los Angeles. It wore sunglasses and flip-flops and marched with the determination of something that did not know how to stop. Subsequent ads showed the bunny interrupting fake commercials for fictional products, crashing through sets, and marching through scenarios that had nothing to do with batteries. A fake commercial for cough syrup would be playing, and the bunny would walk through the shot. The campaign worked because it broke the format completely. It made the viewer unsure whether they were watching a real ad or a prank. For a battery company, that level of attention was worth more than any product demonstration ever could be. Number 5. Life Alert. In 1989, a commercial aired showing an elderly woman named Mrs. Fletcher lying on her bathroom floor after a fall. She pressed a button on a pendant around her neck and spoke 6 words that became one of the most quoted lines of the decade. "I have fallen and I cannot get up." The actress was Edith Four, born in 1916. She reportedly improvised the line during filming. A stunt person performed the actual fall, but Ford delivered the line with such genuine distress that it felt real. The commercial was supposed to sell a medical alert device called Life Call. Instead, it became a national punchline. Comedians quoted it. Children shouted it on playgrounds. T-shirts printed it. Stand-up routines across the country built entire bits around that single sentence. The phrase was so widely mocked that it overshadowed the serious purpose of the product, which was genuinely designed to help elderly people living alone summon emergency services after a fall. In 2007, USA Today ranked it the #1 most memorable commercial in a survey of the past 25 years. The cruelest irony was that a commercial about the vulnerability of aging became famous because young people thought an old woman calling for help was hilarious. Number 4. Folgers Coffee. The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup. That jingle first aired in 1984, and it played during every commercial break on morning television for what felt like the rest of human history. The commercials always followed the same formula. Someone woke up, the smell of Folgers filled the house. A family gathered in the kitchen with warm smiles and ceramic mugs, as if caffeine had already solved every problem in their lives. In one famous holiday version, a college-age son came home at dawn, crept into the kitchen, and started brewing a pot. The family woke to the sound and smell of him making coffee. The mother appeared in the doorway. Tears, hugs, all triggered by freeze-dried crystals in a paper filter. The emotional manipulation was expert level. The product was instant coffee that cost $3 a can, but the commercials sold a fantasy where your family loved each other unconditionally, and the only thing needed to prove it was a pot of coffee at 6 in the morning. No family in America actually functioned that way before caffeine. The commercial knew it. The audience knew it. Everybody played along anyway because the jingle was already stuck in your head before your feet hit the floor. Number 3. Ronco Pocket Fisherman. Ron Popeil was the godfather of television marketing. In the 1980s, his company Ronco filled late-night airwaves with products that solved problems most people did not know they had. The Pocket Fisherman was a collapsible fishing rod small enough to fit in your jacket pocket or your glove compartment. The commercial showed Popeil himself standing on a dock, casting the tiny rod into a lake with the enthusiasm of a man who had just invented fire. It cost $19.99. It weighed almost nothing. It caught fish about as well as a stick with some string tied to it. But the commercial was mesmerizing because Popeil believed in his own products with a sincerity that bordered on religious conviction. He did not act. He testified. Every product demonstration was a sermon delivered to an audience of insomniacs watching television at 2 in the morning. Every "but wait, there's more" moment was an altar call. Popeil sold the Pocket Fisherman, the Veg-O-Matic, the inside-the-shell egg scrambler, and dozens of other products that most households used once and then stored forever. The Pocket Fisherman sold over 2 million units. Logic had nothing to do with it. Belief did. Number 2, Baby Alive, the doll that ate, drank, and then produced something in its diaper. Baby Alive had existed since the 1970s, but in the 1980s, the commercials leaned into realism with startling commitment. Little girls in the ads fed the doll a packet of powdered food mixed with water. The doll chewed with a motorized jaw. The doll swallowed. And then, inevitably, the doll needed a diaper change. The commercial presented this entire cycle as wholesome fun. Children smiled through every stage as though changing a diaper was the highlight of their afternoon. The reality was that Baby Alive's feeding mechanism jammed constantly. The food mixture hardened inside the doll like cement if not cleaned immediately. The internal tubing clogged, the motor burned out, and the diaper output looked exactly as unpleasant as the real thing. Parents who bought the doll discovered that cleaning artificial baby waste out of a plastic torso at 8 on a Saturday morning was not the joyful bonding experience the commercial had promised. It was a toy that accurately simulated the least enjoyable parts of parenthood and marketed it as entertainment. Millions of parents paid $29.99 to find that out the hard way. Number 1. G.I. Joe Public Service Announcements. At the end of every G.I. Joe cartoon episode in the 1980s, a 30-second segment aired where a child faced some kind of danger. A kid played near a downed power line. A teenager considered taking a ride with a stranger. Someone found a gun in a drawer. A G.I. Joe character appeared, calmly explained the correct course of action, and the child looked into the camera and said, "Now I know." The G.I. Joe character responded, "And knowing is half the battle." Every single week, the same format, the same closing line. Military action figures who spent 22 minutes firing laser weapons at a global terrorist organization called Cobra, then paused to teach children about stranger danger and electrical safety. The tonal whiplash was extraordinary. A cartoon soldier who had just survived an explosion lectured a child about looking both ways before crossing the street. Nobody at Hasbro or the FCC saw any contradiction. These were toy commercials disguised as moral education wrapped inside a cartoon about war. And for an entire generation, knowing became the default response to any piece of new information, no matter how trivial. Half the battle. 25 commercials. Not one of them made any logical sense. A dog sold beer, A grape danced. A cereal threatened children. A military action figure taught stranger danger, and every single one of them worked. They sold products. They entered the language. They rewired the way a generation thinks about advertising. Here is what the 1980s understood that the modern world has forgotten. People do not buy logic. They buy feeling. They buy the jingle they cannot stop singing in the shower 3 decades later. The 1980s were not clever. They were fearless. They put a talking bear in a bedroom and a 6-foot pitcher through a brick wall and a rubber-faced man at your window yelling about car dealerships. None of it made sense. That was the whole point. Share your favorite in the comments. I want to know if the Kool-Aid Man gets more love than the California Raisins. I want to know if anyone else's clapper went off every time the dog barked. Because these were not just commercials. They were proof that the strangest ideas, delivered with enough conviction, can outlast the products they were built to sell.